I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. She's 26 and she's just left a very significant relationship. And one of the things that I said to her that was very important at this time was to be able to feel her feelings. And she said to me what so many people would say: I don't know how to do this. And I think it's a truth that many of us carry beneath the surface. It's not that we're lacking feeling, it's that we lack permission to feel without judgment, permission to let our heart speak, even when our mind is running off into a story. And what's happened for so many of us is that we've grown accustomed to living in this in between place. So we're good at analyzing the pain, we're good at explaining it, we're good at strategizing around it, but we never truly let it land. And when we begin to get in touch with whatever we feel, with kindness, something remarkable happens. That protective shell that we've built around our hearts, it starts to soften. And once our heart starts to soften, those walls start to crack a little. And when that happens, the light starts to leak in. So this isn't easy. In fact, I feel in a lot of ways it's some of the most difficult work we'll ever do, because to soften isn't to collapse. It's not to abandon discernment or safety or boundaries. What we're doing is we're refusing the inner war against what's already happening inside of us. So I want to walk you through what this looks like in life, not in theory. This is how you do it. You sit quietly and you name your feeling in the body first, like there's tension behind my ribs, or there's a dull ache beneath my navel. And you don't rush to identify its cause. You don't demand a resolution. You don't try and dress it up in any kind of coherent narrative. You simply see, you listen, you breathe. And in that moment, the shell doesn't break all the way down, but a crack appears. And cracks are invitations. So on the other side of that crack, there's possibility. There's more space. There's more softness. There's more room to live. And the old mind is going to say all sorts of things, like something like it might say, you can't feel this too much, you'll drown. Or it might say, stay stronger. Or it might say, you'll get overwhelmed. But in that stillness, another voice might emerge that says, maybe I don't need to escape. Or maybe I can trust myself just enough to stay. And over time, staying with that friction instead of resisting the emotion, just letting the emotion move through, this begins to shift things. And that wall of defensiveness begins to loosen. And you begin to see how often you've pulled away from life in order to avoid feeling. And you begin to understand that numbness isn't peace. It's a muted exile from what is alive and true. And you start to recognize that your feelings aren't enemies, they are messengers. And you discover that you may have misinterpreted them as threats only because you never allowed their presence. You might begin to realize that beneath your anger, there's hurt. Beneath your hurt, there's fear. Beneath your fear, there's longing. And as more of these cracks open, more of your life becomes workable. And conversations that once felt unsafe become possible. And your relationships begin to gain more depth because you show up more honestly. And choices that once felt paralyzing begin to emerge in clarity. And you become more present to yourself. This is the work of softening. It's a practice. You won't do it perfectly. You're going to fall back into old habits. You're going to tighten again, but that's part of the dance. The question isn't whether you will harden again, it's whether you will return. Will you remember to open, even when the world tries to close you down? Because in softening, you don't lose strength. You lose the need to constantly fight inside yourself. You learn how to trust your own resilience. You learn that courage doesn't always come in a big roar. Sometimes it sits quietly, breathing alongside your pain. So if you say to yourself, I don't know how to feel, I want you to know you don't need to fix it. You don't need to understand it all. You only need to allow it, to stay with it, to listen, to respond, not from fear, but from kindness. And in those moments, especially in the small ones, the shell begins to dissolve. And life, in its messy, beautiful way, begins to open up again. I hope this has been helpful. Subscribe, like this video. Let me present you with more. As always, be kind, take care, go gently in the world.